you were on Second Nature podcast not that long ago. I try not to like have a have a guest on that was just on that. We do have overlap, but I try not to be so tight behind them. However, your situation is different, and I'll tell you why. I was listening to your podcast, and like 10 minutes into it, I texted Aaron. I was like, please introduce me to Morgan. I need to have him on this podcast. And the reason why is because what I loved about your story is that you actually built your prototypes. And I
Yeah.
think that that is a little bit of a throwback because that's how outdoor brands used to start. Like we solved our own problems. Like
Hmm.
I needed a better backpack, I need a better climbing harness, I need a better tent, and we go and make it. And not that older is better, but I think it's just something different that we don't see a lot of. And so that's why I love that kind of garage tinkerer. I think in your case it was an attic tinkerer. So that's what I want to cover today is like what what brought you to it, like what took you to the
Yeah.
attic to start sewing. But before we get into that, to start, I thought it'd be really cool for you to tell the story of your first experience running a marathon.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was 2011. And the where I grew up is so I grew up in Los Angeles, and there's a pretty wide range of economic opportunities and stuff like that. I'm grateful enough to have grown up in a house where like never worried about putting food on the table or anything, but that wasn't the case with my classmates. And we Los Angeles Unified School District partners with a organization called Students Run LA, which basically takes kids from seventh grade, you have to be age 12, through 12th grade, and trains them to run a marathon. So you could do it as a seventh grader, you could do it as a 12th grader, you could do it every year for 5 years if your school has that. And it's everything from kids who've not run more than a mile before, which is the group that I was in, and then takes you through a 5K in September right after school starts and a 5K in October, and then two half marathons, one 18 miler, and then it culminates at the Los Angeles Marathon in mid March. And I was never the fastest kid. Like I'm still not the fastest kid, but the the marathon that year, like I at least knew I could finish. And as we get closer and closer to race day, the weather keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And Nike was a sponsor of Students Run LA at the time, so they gave everyone this gear, and you could either choose unisex or men's shorts. And I chose the men's shorts, which ended up being 1 inch split shorts. And I was like 90 pounds. I'm pretty tall, so you can imagine like this lanky seventh grader in 1 inch split shorts with a trash bag on top. So it did all the photos from that day look like I don't have pants on. And I had my iPod shuffle in and was running in the rain. And it was like I was supposed to see my mom at mile 8, but it was her first time ever spectating the LA Marathon. And I was calling her on the phone, and she goes, I won't be there at mile 8. I just found out I'm at mile 12. And I still remember I grew up on country music, and I had a Beer in Mexico by Kenny Chesney on my iPod shuffle. And I was like, I can't listen to any music about people having fun because this is one of the worst experiences of my life. So I like shoved my iPod shuffle in my pocket and just started crying while still running because I still had to make forward progress. And this guy, Chris, came up from behind me and was like, Hey, are you okay? I'm like, No, I'm not going to see my mom for another 4 miles. And I'm miserable and I'm cold, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes, All right, I'll run with you to your mom. And so my mom was 4 miles away. We ran together for what, probably 40 minutes, probably longer, 45 minutes. And my mom's side of the story is that she sees me run up with Chris and goes, who is this guy that's running with my 12-year-old son? And Chris and I ended up running the entire race together. And what Chris told me repeatedly throughout the entire race, whenever I wanted to stop, whenever I wanted to quit, was that you're running with 26,000 of your best friends and no one wants to see you step off the course. Chris was in much better shape. He did not have to be back with me. I finished in a 5:28 that year, but we beat Chris's prior marathon PR by chance by about 30 seconds. And he was definitely in shape to run 20, 30, 40 minutes faster than we did. But he stayed with me and sacrificed his entire race just to make sure that I could finish. And so I ran with Students Run LA for 2 years in seventh grade and eighth grade, but I've run 10 LA marathons since then. And most of the time I pick up a Students Run LA kid in the last 2 to 8 miles and run with them for at least a little while to try and pass that on.
First of all, it's incredible that a 12-year-old is running marathons. I don't know why. That to me, that just yeah, that just seems like amazing. So good on you for even considering that. I heard you tell that story before, and I love it. I love that idea of helping somebody out and having essentially a mentor run next
Yeah.
to you. And why I wanted you to tell that story to begin is because I feel like there's a very clear through line from that moment to where you are today. And I'm projecting that connection, but I assume that you recognize that connection as well, and you're kind of seeing that how running and the community of running has brought you to become essentially an entrepreneur serving the running community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it gets back to this idea of like, there's no such thing as a wasted effort. Like, even if we don't see the connection of the exact through line, like, I probably was going to do cross country in high school anyways. Would I probably be running without having done those marathons then? Probably. But the small experiences that might not directly tie to today, I still think are really important. And that changed a big way that I try to approach. I've had good years and bad years in terms of being able to like give my full self to be able to give to other people. But that core experience at age 12, having a really hard time, I think does define like a lot of the way that I try to give back now and just be a fan of the people around me. I think that's like the most positive way we can approach the world.
Very cool. Okay, so now let's jump to the present moment and
Yeah.
t- talk about what you're currently working on or what you currently actually just launched. What was your official launch date for Dara?
May 7th. So we're at
Okay.
like 35 days or something.
Okay, 35. But who's counting?
Right.
Um, Tell me about what took you, like the early prototypes. Like, what was the thing? Well, let's explain what you've with the product behind the first product behind Dara, and
Yep.
then just what was the genesis for it, and then how did you decide like, oh, I'm going to solve my own problem here?
Yeah. So we built the world's first dial fit running belt. So if you think about the dial that you would have on a pair of shoes or a pair of ski boots, we essentially put that on the side of a running belt, which lets you adjust the sizing and the compression on the fly without some of these like ladder locks or some of the other ways that other belts in the industry allow you to adjust your belt. We have a couple of other features, but that's the headline feature that really differentiates us. So I picked trail running and ultra running up when I moved to Mammoth about 5 years ago. And it was kind of an on and off relationship, but I went the normal route of starting off with a running vest and then slowly was like, this belt thing that I see the fast people running with seems kind of cool. And at that time, the naked belt was about all you could get. So I ran with a naked belt for a while, and then started picking up some of the other belts that have come onto the space that are a little bit more expensive from a variety of brands. And my biggest problem with all of the other belts that's been on the market is that if you're going to be able to adjust a belt, I think you should be able to do it on the fly and adjust it in between aid stations, coming out of aid stations. The amount of stuff we're carrying, especially while racing, fluctuates several times throughout a race. And a dial made a lot of sense. And so I've known how to sew for 5 or 6 years now from the first company that I launched. And so my attic has a bunch of technical fabrics and a industrial sewing machine. And I had run with a pair of Ultra Mont Blanc boas several years ago and threw them in the closet when I had put 600 miles on them instead of throwing them away, thinking one day I might need the boas off of them for some project. I've built several things over the last several years, just personally. And so I essentially sewed the boa to essentially what was a remade naked belt. And that was the first prototype. It was really ugly. The compression system actually compressed the pockets down so you couldn't put anything in them and stuff like that. But it was proof of concept enough when I went back to running with some of my other belts and instinctually would reach down to my right hip to try and tighten the belt. And it was like this. I had only run with my homemade prototype a handful of times, before switching back to some other options just to see what I missed or whatever. And this instinctual thing was built in within the first 10 runs of like, if I want, I feel like I need to adjust this and I want to reach down to my hip to do it. It was really natural. And that was kind of the moment I was like, okay, I have already built this habit up and I bet you that other people could too.
I want to jump into so that you did have a business, a startup prior to this.
Yep.
That's an important story that I want to definitely come back to. When you sowed this first prototype, were you thinking, oh, this could be a new business for me? Or were you thinking, were you just scratching your own itch? Or were you thinking this could go to somewhere? I could start selling these.
Put it somewhere in between. Like my parents still give me crap for the 300 yards of Velcro that are in their 300 yards of Velcro that are in their garage because when I was in high school, I was known for never having my shoes tied on the cross country team. And so I went on Alibaba and bought 300 yards of Velcro so that I could figure out how to make Velcro shoelaces essentially. And I was going to start that business. And thankfully, that business never got off the ground. So that's an innate part of me and always has been for my whole life. So when I built backpacking backpacks for my dog, there was also a part of me that was like, I could turn this into a business. And then I was like, no, this is silly. And that wouldn't work. So when I was building this, it truly was because it was a product that I wanted and that I saw a need for. There's always something in the back of your mind that goes like, I could build something out of this, but I didn't decide to hit go until I had made a product that all of my friends were asking for. And that was the real impetus. Like it was friends that were like, hey, I want that too. And I like product design, but I don't like sewing very much.
Okay. So you don't like sewing.
I don't like production sewing. Like sewing
Okay.
the same thing 12, 15, 20 times, that gets old and that's not fun at that point to me.
Okay. Fair enough. I agree 100%. Okay. So talk to me a little bit about that first company and then, what was it? Why did it stumble? And then, what did you learn from it that you've taken in to Dera?
Yeah, so the first company was a company called Near Zero Labs. It was making ultralight camera backpacks. So essentially taking the normal design of camera backpacks that a lot of people use with a horseshoe zipper on the back and stuff like that, but combining it with the ethos behind like a hyperlight mountain gear that makes really lightweight backpacking setups. I launched that company on Kickstarter and we were running it very similar, or I was running it very similarly to the way that a lot of cottage backpacking businesses are started. So I was making everything by hand almost. We were allowing people to customize the colors that they wanted and all of that sort of stuff. I launched this right as I came out of college. So there are two reasons that the company stumbled. The first one is that I set it up completely wrong. Like in order to make backpacks, each one took, say, 6 hours. I wasn't selling them for enough money to have the time to do it. And then I could sew 2 backpacks in a day and take 12 hours. And then I'd get home and I wouldn't have time to do the marketing or the product development or send emails or any of the other stuff that goes into building a business. So the traction fell apart really quickly because that company was so dependent on my time in order to actually produce the product. That was when things started to go south and I started like looking for my first job at a marketing agency and stuff like that. But we also had a trademark dispute from someone else who was using the name Near Zero. We launched our product first. He had filed for a trademark first and he had a lot more money than I had. And there was no amicable solution that could be found. I was open to pretty much anything, but the other guy wasn't.
Hmm.
And so I hit a point where I didn't have any money left. We'd spent it on a lawyer. Rebranding was not going to be enough because the company wasn't set up correctly. Like with or without a new brand, I was still going to have to spend a ridiculous amount of time building the product. And so we just shut it down after about, give it 18 months or something. And I'm proud of what we did there. And like I talked about earlier, there's no such thing as wasted effort. And I truly believe that. So even though I spent a lot of time like reeling from that and having a really hard time shutting that down and winding it down, I learned that, in my opinion, if you want to build a company that has any sort of scale, it's really, really hard to start off building products by hand on your own because, especially for those of us that have other jobs, if you have to spend 4 hours after work sewing, you don't have the time to do the marketing and stuff like that. And then the other thing was I had so much imposter syndrome. I took advice from some professors at the time because I was just finishing college, but I never reached out to anybody else who owned a business or anything like that. And that was a key fault. And at the time, I didn't realize that or realize how big of a problem it was. But this time around, I had conversations with several people long before I really even knew that I was going to start a business. It was like, if I were to do this, I'd have to figure out how to do marketing or how to do manufacturing. So let me go talk to someone who's done that before, just so I can decide if I really even want to do this. And that's been a key part, beginning to end.
Okay. So a big change is now you know how to ask for help.
Essentially, yeah, I know how to ask for help and I know when to say I need help from someone else to do something completely. I did everything front to end for the other business. I have someone else leading a lot of our visual stuff now in terms of photo and video. I've asked for help on other things. So it's asking for help, but not only for advice, for actual time and being willing to pay other people for their time, I think is important.
Sure.
We
How
we
much?
can't be experts at everything.
Yeah, certainly not. We're lucky if we're expert at one thing.
Exactly.
So, okay, well, intellectual property is a can be a real kick in the ass sometimes, and you've you've got the wounds to as an example of that. What have you done differently with Dara as far as kind of protecting your intellectual property?
Yeah, we're working on a patent. The timeline is winding down, so we can't necessarily patent putting a dial on a belt, but from the conversations I've had with lawyers, we can patent the specific integration. So the dial pulls multiple directions, has multiple functions. It's not as simple as just putting a dial on a belt. So that's the one first thing. And then the second thing is we do have a trademark that is pending and has positive momentum so far. So hopefully we'll at least own our name this time, which is a foundational aspect.
Yeah, for sure. So you said the one of the first things a problem you needed to solve is you can't be the person behind the sewing machine.
Yep.
And so that requires, yeah, going to work with a factory. That is like a very hard first step for a lot of brands,
Yeah.
for a number of reasons. It's like finding a needle in the haystack for one to find the right partner. The other thing is like, how do I communicate with them? What do they need from me? I'm not a specialist in this. There's all sorts of variables in the equation that I think a lot of early stage outdoor founders just don't really know about. So talk to me about your experience of like learning what you don't know, and then finding a factory that would actually work with a single product startup.
Yeah. So the first thing that I did was talk to someone who had manufactured stuff overseas, and specifically in a really big factory, a factory that's much bigger than what we're doing, but they also only had one product when they launched. So it was pretty one to one. And the primary thing that I learned, because I didn't want to go to any of these factories and be like, what do you need in order to work with me? Because I had a feeling they just wouldn't respond. And the primary thing that I got was like, you need to give them a reason and a hope for why you're going to not just place one 20, 30, $40,000 purchase order, and that you're going to be a $500,000 business for them in 2 years, hopefully, right? And that those exact numbers are fungible depending on the exact factory, but that was the key insight there. And so the bills of lading for sea shipments, and I'm speaking as far as my knowledge, I'm probably not perfectly accurate on any of this, but the bills of lading for sea shipments are public in the United States. So
Yes.
you can go and look up any companies where they're getting their stuff from. You could probably look us up in the next couple of weeks on when they're where we got our stuff from. And I made a list of all the factories that could possibly be wanting to work with us. I had a minimum quality standard I wanted to reach. So I specifically was looking at companies like Osprey and the North Face and Patagonia and saying, okay, Osprey's biggest factory probably is not going to work with us. Two, three, four, five, six, seven, because all these factories or all these companies are widely distributed across several factories. They might be willing to work with us. And I originally sent out emails, and a lot of this was AI assisted. I think that's a key component here. I'm not very bullish on AI. I'll be very upfront about that. And I think that a lot of the written content and stuff like that that AI puts out is pretty rubbish, but it's really good at aggregating information that's hard to find with a simple Google search, like processes for finding factories. I'm sure that information is somewhere that the AI algorithms have been trained on. And being able to tap into that is something that I actually think AI is incredibly valuable for. So I worked with some of the AI tools to create a strategy to reach out. And then I reached out to 12 factories without very much detail of just being like, this is kind of what we hope to be doing, but I didn't tell them much about the product. I didn't tell them much about this. And I got answers from almost none of them. Two of the like really small factories I didn't necessarily want to work with that bad. So I went back to my AI tool and said, okay, we didn't get any answers from anybody. I don't need to be that protective of this idea, first of all, because I don't think it's that novel. Like the implementation of the dial is novel, but solely putting a dial on a belt is not that novel. And if one of these factories goes and runs with it, there's no sweat off my back. Like I still have my job and whatever. And if one of these factories doesn't respond to me, I'm not going to do it anyways. So I reached out basically with all the information I had. And I said, like, this is the product that I have. This is exactly how I'm going to implement it. This is exactly how many units I want to order. This is my timeline for ordering them. And this is why you should trust me. And a key component here is that, like, I work in the outdoor industry. I work in marketing. I have a background in, told them I had a background in product development, even though it was one company 5 years ago that I built myself.
You made backpacks.
And yeah, but no traditional product development experience.
They don't
right?
need to know that. They don't need to know that.
And then I got responses from a bunch of factories. Some of them wanted a minimum order quantity of 1,000 per size, which would have put us at 5,000 units, which would have been over $100,000, which was not doable. And then we found a couple that were willing to work with us in the rough minimum order quantity area that we were looking for. And we went from there.
I love it. I love that you reverse engineered the. Did you use Import Yeti or Pangea or something like that?
Import Yeti.
Import Yeti. I've pointed so many people to Import Yeti. It's such a cheat code. It
Totally.
works in this. It works in the U.S. and that's really all you need. You know, I'm based here in British Columbia. A lot of people I work with are in Canada. Doesn't matter. Your favorite brand, whatever it may be, and I use this in my previous business for myself, is like, what factory's making this? How can I get in touch with these factories? And it's all public records. As long as
Totally.
it came in on a boat, you can find it.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Which makes apparel a little bit harder from what I'm finding, because a lot of apparel, like, it can still be brought over by air. So there's a little bit more obscurity around the apparel side. But as far as backpacks and stuff like that go, we're working with a backpack manufacturer, even though a lot of the design revolves around clothing concepts. That stuff's easy.
Right. Oh, for sure. And are they in Vietnam?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Good for you. How did you talked you talked a little bit about this on Second Nature about tech packs and creating tech packs. And I thought that was super interesting. Again, you using AI as a tool. Talk to me a little bit about the tech pack creation, because this is, again, great. You found the needle in the haystack. You got the factory. Now I need to communicate to them in a very clear and precise way so that I get back what I'm hoping this product will look like. The way to communicate is through technical drawings called tech packs. So talk to me about how you develop your own tech packs.
Yeah, there's a really great blog post. I believe it's from the woman who leads Pocampo, which is a cycling bag brand. And she has an article in there about tech packs. And so that's where I started off with. But I needed back and forth feedback on the tech packs I built. And I don't have a subscription to whatever the preferred tech pack builder is. So I was building them all in Photoshop using like square tools and outlines and stuff like that. So it wasn't pretty, but I would essentially build as close as I could and upload it into the AI tool and say, here's the tech pack that I'm building. Here's some photos of my product. Can you give me feedback on what needs to be changed? And we went through dozens and dozens and dozens of revisions of like, your bill of materials looks like it's missing these couple of components that are important. I was like, I don't really care what paracord they're using, but I'm putting it in there anyways, and things like that. And then we still sent our tech pack off to the factory, and the product that I received was completely different. I see how they could have built the product that they did off of the tech pack that I built. But essentially, I then sent a one of the prototypes that I had made in my attic off to the factory. And having that and the tech pack was the powerful tool. I think they needed both of them. And without a tech pack, most of these factories wouldn't have even talked to me. And so that's the tech pack itself didn't carry the development, but I think that it was a key component of getting in touch with the factories. And then alongside a prototype was a key part of helping them actually build it.
I love this. You're at this place. You're at the perfect intersection of old school meets new school, right? Like you went into your attic, you sewed your own prototypes, you iterated, you improved, you tested it, and then you're now using these new tools, which, you know, for better or for worse, they have consequences, but they are helpful at times. And
Totally.
I love that that's this really cool intersection of like old meets new. And yeah, you could, it's amazing you can just do stuff like this, right? Like you could,
It's
one
crazy.
one person in Mammoth Lakes, California has all the power of a large business with a laptop.
Yeah, when I built the first business, so I said I was making everything myself. That was almost true. We had the backpack straps and back panel construction built by another manufacturer, but I had someone else completely manage that manufacturer relationship and building the tech packs for that and everything like that. And I would have had to do that again had these tools not been here. And so there is environmental impact and all the other impacts that do need to be recognized when we talk about AI. However, the this company would not be off the ground without those tools. I wouldn't have had the money, period, in order to do it. And if we can build the company that we want to build, I do think we can have a net positive effect on the way things work in terms of like output. We're working with a factory that is really conscious about the amount of energy that they use and the water that they use and stuff like that. So if we can make product that we know that we're being conscious about building, I think that some use of AI tools can be acceptable in that kind of situation.
Cool. So give me a little bit of a timeline from sewing your first prototype to now I've got a working sample that I'm production ready and ready to go. What's the timeline between those two things?
Yeah, the first prototype was December 2024 and probably built, say, 20 versions between then and September 2025. So give it about 9 months. And I think that's a key component here about being able to build something on your own is that a factory is not going to go through 15 prototypes with you. Like they, especially if you're a brand new whatever, like you get three and that's about it. You're going to pay a lot of money for anything you want to do more than three. So I had built three or four versions before I got to one that I was happy with myself, and then started handing them out to friends. And they said, like, hey, you've got this zipper pocket on the back, but I would really like to be able to throw my phone in there. And so I widened it and made it available for a phone. And we tested several things, changed the size, changed the height, changed the shape, the way that it tapered and stuff like that. And whether you're building something that you can use 3D printing at home, or if you can figure out how to sew and do that, going through those processes also lets you make a better first iteration product, I think, and bringing it to a factory that's ready. So, anyways, had several prototypes in hands of friends, mostly just friends around here that I run with casually to get feedback there. Had a final version, I believe in November ish, final ish version that went straight off to the factories. I made a couple of those. We were working with two factories and ended up selecting one after that point, and then went through three iterations with our factory to make sure that seams were hidden correctly and that the product quality was right and stuff like that. So we still needed our three iterations anyways, and then had a final that I received in early January of this year. So give it a 14-month development process before I had a product that I could actually give a factory money to produce.
The days are long, but the years are short. That is like a very short process. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sure it didn't feel like that when you're sewing and doing all the things, but that you just speed run through product
totally.
development. So that's super impressive. Okay, so you've got the prototype, you're ready to go. At what point are you like, okay, I need to get eyeballs on this because I'm moving forward. I'm launching this product. Here it comes. So you're simultaneously doing product development. What are you doing with the other part of your brain that's doing kind of the early, because you, like you said, you do kind of come from the marketing side of things. What are you doing from the marketing side first? And when did you start that process and what's worked along the way?
Yeah, I basically split this into two halves. So I did all the product development before I had even really considered what the brand was like. I knew what I wanted the brand to feel like and what I wanted it to look like, but I hadn't taken any pictures or designed anything or designed a website or anything like that. And the main part of that was that we needed a logo to be able to be on the belt. So I at least had to figure out where that went. And I made the logo myself in Illustrator, and it was about as good as I could build. And I'm really happy with where it's at, but I didn't hire, that was one thing that I did not hire out, was a logo designer, because I didn't have the $2,000 to $3,000 that most logo designers were asking for. And so I basically sent the factory half of my savings, more than half of my savings, and then said, okay, we're going to do Instagram and figure out how we do this on Instagram. So then I started taking videos, all with my phone, although I was a photographer at one point. Like, I think that phones are plenty good these days to be able to run a content team, and launched the Instagram on my birthday, which was January 19th. So this was a couple weeks after we sent money to the factory. And that was just with a couple of posts, had some friends share them and stuff like that. Then we got a prototype into the hands of one of the athletes that was going to be at Black Canyon, kind of I hesitate to call him an underdog, but he's not a sponsored runner. And so it was easy to get him something that he didn't have any brand obligations around, and had him wear the belt at that race. At that race, we also paid for another photographer to spend an hour with him, which cost us $500 to get some beginning creative that we could use on social media and in ads. And then he placed second at that race, which was a live streamed race. He was going back and forth with the first place guy, sorry, he placed third, but he was in second for most of the race, going back and forth with the first place guy. So our belt was front and center on thousands of people who were watching the live stream. Marketing, like, aside, that's just a lucky pull for us, and it really helped us. And I still have people to this day who are saying, like, I bought this because I remember seeing it on Cade at Black Canyon in February. So once that happened, we then had the tools to be able to start pushing money into paid ads. And that was where we did for email lead generation. A key component here is that I take a lot of inspiration from the fashion industry and industries like that to do a really good job of building community. I think that, like, the outdoor industry builds community in a way that is pretty different from like most of the other, and I think that's good, but everything I keep doing with this business goes in the opposite direction of how the outdoor industry does things, and that's intentional. This is a big experiment for me at the end of the day, and I think that it's really fun to run in the opposite direction. And so I knew that I wanted to collect emails and do most of our communication through email as opposed to posting on Instagram. So between January, when we launched Instagram, and the time that we launched, I think we only made 12 posts. It was not very many, and would probably be completely antithetical, and is completely antithetical to any of the other outdoor brands that have launched in the last couple of years. A lot of them have built up a really strong Instagram following. We had almost twice the number of people on our email list as we had as followers on Instagram, and I had a direct line into their inboxes. So while I was running Instagram ads and Facebook ads for about $13 a day, collecting leads and stuff like that, I was also sending weekly or bi-weekly updates to everybody on the email list, which is really a trust exercise. If you're going to be launching a product and you want people to give you a good amount of money, for a lot of the people buying this product, it's, that's potentially 4 to 6 hours of their hourly wage. That's a lot of money. And for a product that doesn't really have very much proof, and they don't know who I am, and they don't know if my company's going to be around in 2 years, it's a trust exercise. And I think that building that through email is really key.
Ooh, can we get into the weeds a little bit on this? Because
Yeah, absolutely.
I love what you're saying. Because first of all, a owned audience is way more powerful than a rented audience. So
Totally.
meaning, if you have them on an email list, you own the audience. If you have a growing social media account, that's a rented audience. And at any point, the landlord can boot you, or throttle you or whatever it is, right? So, yes, email. What were you doing? So you were using the Meta toll booth to get customer eyeballs on Dara, and then was the call to action? Just walk me through that ad funnel.
Yeah, the funnel was essentially just we ended up having maybe 10 ads across the span of 2.5 months. So we launched more ads than just one or two, but it wasn't like we did this creative volume thing that a lot of people are screaming from the rooftops. I don't buy into it. And so had launched with maybe 4 or 5 ads, and all of them said early access. And what giving me your email got you was early access, updates along the way, and an early discount. And I figured with those three things, if someone is marginally interested, they'll put their email in it. And then I can do the work on the email side of things with automated flows and ad hoc emails in order to convince them and remove the hesitations around giving me their money without really any proof other than what ended up being like 3 or 4 athletes saying that they had a good experience with it.
What were the automated flows?
Primarily, it was just a welcome flow. And so the first one was your general, like, hey, you're on the list. But one thing that I've made sure to do pretty much throughout the entire process is thank people for any action that they're taking. So if they're on the email list, I'm not just saying, like, thanks for being on the email list. Like, it's truly a message that's like, hey, thank you for being here. I know that what we're building is really special, and I'm glad that you're here to see us build it and bring people into the community a little bit better. So that was a very brief story about why we started. Maybe it's 8 or 10 sentences long. And then a couple days later, they got another email, which was the story that I've basically told you so far, which is I started building this for myself about a year ago. Here's photos of all the prototypes that we've gone through, and here's where we're at today. We launch in, and I would update it as we went. So we launched in 2 months, we launched in 1 month, we launched in 2 weeks, we launched in a couple days. I would update that as we went. And then give people the proof behind the fact that our product's going to be really high quality. So I talked about the testimonial that we got from Cade when he ran the race, and he gave me some great words. I talked about the factory that we're working with and what the other brands that this factory works with are. All things of, if you think through the hesitations that someone is going to have when buying something from an unknown company, those are the questions that we had to answer. So those hesitations are like, is the product going to actually arrive? Who's the guy who's building this? And is he actually going to build something good? Is the product going to be there 2 years from now, or am I going to have to replace it like my other belt, or whatever those questions are? And thinking through those questions dictated the entire email funnel that we did. I think that welcome flow was only 2 emails. It may have been 3 at some point, but then I cut it down just to get people into our ad hoc emails more often, because I wasn't sending when someone had received an email within like 2 or 3 days. And the ad hoc emails were more important because those were giving really concrete information of exactly where we're at and what's happening today, which I think is more important than some of those flows.
What did the ads lead to? Just a single landing page? And what was on that? If it was just a single landing page, what was on there?
Yeah, so we did all the lead generation on our website. It started off with a hero image that had one of those like problem statements of like, your belt, like if you're running, your belt just shouldn't bounce. And it was a lot more elegantly written than that. I don't have that copy in front of me, but it was that. Then it was kind of an ethos statement of like, if you want to go far, your gear has to be ready to do it too. That kind of concept. Again, I'm butchering all the copy we made. Then it was a photo of the belt with call outs onto the different features. So like we've talked about earlier, there's a dial on the belt, but we also have a waterproof pocket for salt pills or gel wrappers or anything like that, so that you don't have to carry a baggie with you or anything like that. We called out the fabric because the fabric is also pretty special compared to some of the other belts on the space. Some of them are using a very similar fabric. And then we called out the pass-through sleeve. Most belts have 2 elastic bands that allow you to stick poles into. We have an actual pass-through sleeve that has tensioning, so it holds things a little bit differently. So those were the primary features that we called out. It went from there into testimonials, and I had 2 friends here locally that have both been in the top 5 at Western States. They tried the belts, gave me testimonials. They're both sponsored runners, so I couldn't use their names or faces, But I did say this runner up at Western States called it flawless, like that kind of concept. And another Western States top 5 finisher forgot she had a bottle in the belt and ended her run thinking she was out of water. Kind of those kind of things. And there were 3 email collection points in it. So you could drop your email on without scrolling. Halfway down, there was another email collection spot. And all the way at the bottom, there was another email collection spot. And that's also something that I think a lot of founders get wrong is they don't want to like put, hey, give me your email. Hey, give me your email. Hey, give me your email. But if it's hidden all the way at the bottom, a lot of people are not going to scroll all the way to the bottom of your landing page to put their email in. And if it's all the way at the top, if someone's at the bottom, they're not scrolling all the way back up to the top to put their email in. Odds are we had 50% of the email entries come in at the top and 25% in the middle and bottom. And I think I'm giving that information because I couldn't find that information anywhere when I was launching. And that was a key point to me of like, the reviews are what convinced these last group of people. The ad is what convinced the first group. This middle group, maybe it was that they needed to see some of the features that we had going on. And I used that we fine-tuned that landing page a couple times, but that was the general structure we landed on.
You just gave us a 5-minute masterclass in landing pages. So thank you. And I hope everybody who's listening took notes. One thing I want to jump back to, because you said something that really caught my attention, and you said, we're building community differently, or something to the effect of the way that building community is a kind of a part of outdoor brands, which is true.
Yep.
Andrew Luter, who I just had on the podcast, talked about outdoor brands really build community and then sell them products kind of over the lifetime. Talk to me about what you're thinking about how you're going to build this thing differently and how you're kind of going against the flow.
Yeah, I don't want to say that these are totally unique thoughts. There are some companies that are doing this very well in this space. There are a lot of companies that I think aren't doing it well. And a lot of this hasn't manifested yet because we're only 30 days in. But from the beginning, a lot of the stories that we've tried to tell, and a lot of this is around storytelling. The outdoor industry does storytelling very well. But it's from doing it from people that are my friends and in my community, or people that now are using the belt and we want to help tell their stories, whether or not they're setting speed records or anything like that. And a key part of that is this concept that I had from the beginning I want this brand to feel like you're on a run with me and my friends, hearing the stories that me and my friends tell. And then I want you to come to Mammoth and come join our run club so that you can go on a run with me and my friends. And if every decision that we make is around that, then I think that's where we kind of grow. And so we've talked about, with my creative partner, we've talked about doing film projects from like people that no one would have any name recognition about, but people have great stories in this space that we can help tell. And when most of these brands are only telling the stories of elite athletes, which don't always resonate super well with me, who has to work a regular 9 to 5, and I've got a dog and a girlfriend, and I can't train for 20 hours a week, and I train a ton compared to anybody else. But if we can tell stories of someone who might get 10 or 15 miles in on an average week, but then they go do rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, like, we can start to craft how we think about our audience and the way that we want our audience to speak to each other. I want people to see someone else with one of our belts and them to have that shared experience. Like, you're not going up to anybody else with a Solomon vest on and being like, yo, we have the same vest. For as long as we can, I'd like to have that be the case with all of our gear, because everybody has been told stories about this community again and again. We're not doing that excellently well right now just because of resources, but over the next 6 months, I think we'll be doing that a lot better.
Okay. I love it. Building a tribe.
Totally. Yeah. And building a tribe that might not show itself on Instagram. Like, we do get comments from a lot of people on Instagram, but that's not where I want this community to be. Like, if we can figure out a way to take it off platform, I'm not sure that Slack is the right option for that. It might be, but even if we can tell stories in email and invite people, I get people who respond to every single one of my emails that I send, telling me about what I had. One guy who was like, I'm going to Korea with your belt next week and I'm so excited. And I respond to every single one of them with the same amount of excitement, because truly, like, I am excited that these people are really excited to go to Korea with the belt. That's freaking cool.
Yeah. And wait till they see it in Korea, because you're going to get a lot of interest now in Korea.
When he said that, I was like, yeah, I think I know what might be around the corner.
Yes, excellent. That's what, please, more people go to Korea with their Dera belts on.
Exactly.
So along the lines of community, you talked about um, the serendipity of having your belt show up on the podium. Uh, in and events and partnerships are really important in the early stages for building a brand. What's your strategy around approaching events, having partnerships with either individual athletes or the events themselves?
Yeah, this comes back into the way that we want to build our own community and tell stories. And so we're partnered with two race organizations this year. One is Mountain Tiger Running, which is a race that they had their first annual race last year. And I took me and all of my friends and we stayed in an Airbnb in Tahoe and wore matching. We have jerseys for our little local run club and wore matching outfits, etc. And the race directors loved us that like we showed up with a ton of excitement on their first year. And so when I was starting this, I reached out to them and I was like, you know how much I love your race. Let me know what I can do to be involved. They also make sense from a belt perspective. They do only sub ultra races. One of their races this year is 11 miles. One of their races is 12 miles, but they're building community in a really great way that other race organizations struggle to do. So we're going to be involved with them and show up. We're going to be at one of they do a group run every Thursday. I'm going up to one of their group runs in a couple of weeks, doing demo belts for everybody who's there, helping join that community, get to know the people in that community so that we can help tell stories about them. And then the other race organization that we're working with this year is Mammoth Trail Fest. And so we're working with both the actual Mammoth Trail Fest event and then the Mammoth, which is the 200-mile that happens the following weekend. That involvement's a lot more involved. We're doing custom belts for those events, which is really exciting. But we get to be there and help tell stories. We're working with some of the other brands that are also there to create visual media and tell stories about runners that are there, whether they're my friends or other people, to try and do our best with that. And so the races are important, but we aren't showing up to events that don't already have a really strong community following behind them, because that value is really hard. Any effort that we put into an event has to extend 6 months beyond an event. And for a lot of these events that happen on one day really quickly, everyone goes home and waits for next year. Those events are not going to provide the experience that we want to be a part of.
I love it because you're borrowing somebody's audience, essentially.
Totally. And providing value back. Like those races are equally excited that we're there as we're excited to be there. And that's another key part of this. Like we don't want to show up and extract and leave either. And that's really important.
How do you gauge the level of community? So you know these two because you're kind of in your geographical region, but as the concentric circles spread out over the U.S. West, essentially, I would imagine that's kind of the plan. How do you identify, like, what are the things you're looking for those events? Be like, yep, they have community. I mean, I know you're embedded within the trail community, but what are you looking for to say, yeah, that they're good. That's something we need to be a part of.
Yeah, I think that going through the first thing that we're going to do is go through the people who are coming to the race and seeing what kind of runners they are. Like if they're the kinds of people, they're traveling from a really long way to come to this specific race, that could be either good or bad. It could be an event that just has a really wide pull from a lot of different people, but then doesn't do much throughout the year. They're just one of those like famous races. Or they have this really close and local community that are really into that. But I don't think that people coming from a long way is necessarily bad either, as long as the race is engaging those people throughout the time. The other key component here is I want to see how many people are coming back year after year. And that's hard, specifically with this race that just had their first year last year. Obviously, I can't audit them based on that, but I know that I'm coming back because of how great an experience it was. Mammoth Trail Fest has a ton of people that are coming back for their 5th year this year, and the event's been going for 5 years. So we're talking about people that have been to all 5 years and have done at least one event. And we live in the middle of nowhere. Like it takes a lot of effort to be here. So if people are putting that effort in, then that's a key signal to me that the community is there and is excited about what the race director is presenting to them. So a lot of that's going to be based on just behavioral stuff. And like I said earlier, I don't necessarily think that Instagram is the key component here, but is that race director sending any emails other than just registration emails throughout the year? That's also going to be a key part, that they're interested in growing their community and not just having a bunch of people sign up and not talking to them for another eight months or whatever that looks like.
So you're right now, or you're direct to consumer. I shouldn't say just direct to consumer. You're 30 something days in selling online. We should probably say you sold out what in a weekend, in your launch weekend, you sold out.
Yeah, so we split our shipment, and our belts were in boxes of 72. And so we were not able to, we got more extra smalls and extra larges than we were ever going to sell. We'll put it that
Hmm.
way. So we sold out of smalls, mediums, and larges. We still had extra smalls and extra larges just because of minimum quantities that we had to pull through. But yes, so we sold out of smalls and mediums in 8 hours. We sold out of larges in 24 hours. The planned early access period, none of this was posted on Instagram. It was entirely through our email list because I promised those people early access. And the plan was for that to be a 3-day early access period. And within 24 hours, almost no one could buy a belt. We had a few people come in and buy extra smalls and extra larges. So then we flipped it into a pre-order phase while I waited for the second shipment to come in. That came in a couple of weeks ago. And so we got out the however many pre-orders that we had out the door, and then we've had a couple orders in between then. I will correct you though, we're not exclusively D2C as of this week.
Okay, that's where I was going with my question.
Yeah, we have 6 retail stores that we are in. They took about 10% of the rest of our stock for the rest of the summer. So we probably won't be opening it up to too many other retail stores, just because part of this thing is that I want every stakeholder, from the stores to our customers and everything like that, to be treated correctly through this whole experience. And these stores are taking a risk on us. Some of them gave us several $1,000 purchase orders. And if I turn around and tell them when they've sold through their stock at the end of July that they can't get any more until our next shipment's here in September, then we run into problems. And that's not the way I want to treat these retail stores. So I'm probably keeping it. There might be another 2 that come on, but it will definitely, I'd be shocked if we hit 10. And that's so that we can give these stores more stock if they need it, because those retail relationships are really important for what we want to do.
Talk to me about that retail strategy, because based on this conversation, you don't go through, it doesn't seem like you go through anything without a strategy, and I appreciate that. So talk to me about this retail strategy. First off, I will congratulate you on that thinking behind, I need to replenish my retail accounts, because that is a critical relationship, like you said. So talk to me about the long term, doesn't even have to be that long of a term, but more than 30-day strategy for retail.
Yeah, the retailers that we're in right now, I'm stoked to be in, like just as stoked as I am about the races that we're participating in. Some of them, their shipments are on the way, but essentially it's Alpenglow up in Tahoe, and the owner of that store runs Broken Arrow Sky Race. So there's
Yeah.
he's deeply into the community. The next one's San Francisco Running Company, and they have a really good pull with their community in San Francisco. And then the other one is Salt Lake Running Company, but they have 4 locations. And I walked into a Salt Lake Running Company store 2 years ago on my way to another race and had the most mind-blowing retail experience that I think I've ever had in a running store. Like, they probably had 30 or 35 people in there shopping on a Friday afternoon, which you rarely ever see in running stores these days. And they probably had 15 individual retail representatives that were there working the floor, or at least it felt like that. They could have had 5, but I was asked. No one in that store seemed overwhelmed. They were all on point, ready to help with what you needed. And so when we were thinking about what retail stores we wanted to be in, they were an easy pick for me, because I know that people are going to take the recommendation of that store really seriously. It also made a lot of sense because one of their buyers was one of the first people on our email list from those Facebook ads. So one of the buyers has been involved since the beginning. He bought a belt on his own with his own money before we had even agreed to be in the store, before they had agreed to carry us. So that's a really all of these things, like we want to be in stores that we're really proud to be in. So that would kind of be where we would potentially add another couple of stores, or these stores that add credibility, that are really selective with the product they bring in. Then we look at this fall, we'll have a much larger order come this fall because of the success that we've had already. If these stores are ready to pick up the belt this fall and there's more of them, we'll open that up to more stores. Still probably not wide open because I need to see how the momentum is at that point. But I was talking to someone who does sales for several brands in the outdoor industry. She works as part of a sales agency, and she was here visiting in town, and was talking to her about this gut feeling that I need to shut down doing any more retail stores. If we wanted to, we could probably go into 30 retail stores. The product is great. I know that from our reviews at this point. And I was telling her, I was like, I really don't think that that's the right option at this point, even though the eyeballs would be great. And she said, you're totally right. And that her company operates under, you have to nail three things to have a really successful retail program. And it's product, brand, and operations. And I know that the brand, we're getting to a place where I'm really confident about the brand. The product is great. Operations is the piece that depends on how many of these stores we bring on. And if I can't properly service these stores, check in with them, potentially help them run ads or whatever that looks like, if sales aren't going as well as they hope, then we miss out on the operations side, and none of these stores place another order this fall. So I would much rather limit it heavily right now so that we can be really proud of the experience we're giving to 8 stores for now and maybe 30 stores this fall, and then maybe open things up mid next year.
Good for you. Are these stores finding you? I take it they're coming to you, or are you going to them?
Yeah, we've reached out to a couple of stores, but those aren't the stores that are involved. The 3 stores that have come on board so far have reached out on their own,
Nice.
or have been connected through a friend that also has a brand at their store, has told them, hey, you should also be carrying this.
Yeah, it's so cool. Good for you. Dylan asked you this question on the Second Nature podcast, but I'm going to ask it to you again just because I'm curious if anything's changed.
Yeah.
How are you financing this, and how are you thinking about moving forward in financing this? Because having enough product to jump onto the retail scene effectively requires a lot of capital. Talk to me about how you're financing this thing and what you're thinking about going forward.
Yeah, it's totally self-financed at this point. I dumped my savings account into a business account at the beginning of this year and then opened up one credit card. Um, at this point, we still are able to do that. We're going to be placing our next order with our factory, and we have enough money to put our 50% down, and we're fine with that after we sell the next however many hundred belts, however many thousand belts we have in my spare bedroom, which is over my shoulder. Then we will be able to carry ourselves throughout the rest of the year. There are some questions around momentum and product expansion that start to bring into question some of the other things around financing. No one almost is ever going to order more than one belt. If we come out with some more colors, maybe we squeeze a couple people that'll have 2 belts because they want to have something that goes with multiple outfits or something. But getting repeat purchases is not going to be easy with the product that we have. So we start looking at things probably like apparel, where I have some ideas around some product that I think we could build in the apparel space that's really unique, that someone might want to own 1 or 2 or 3 of, if it's a great running shirt or something like that. So that's where some of these capital questions come into. I think we could get to that line without taking on any external funding, but I'm too busy right now to really consider either
Sure.
way. It's just something out on the horizon that I know if I can get this brand to where I want it to be in a year, it's either going to be cash flow hell for a year, or we'll need some influx of cash in order to get some of these other product lines off the ground. But I don't want to start the treadmill of funding either. And so I have to do it in a way that's like, we are going to do this, and that's going to launch us to this place, in which case we can exist on that or be in another place that puts us in a really strong position to either expand further, however that looks. But I don't want to go on the like revolving lines of capital from 18 different sources. That's not fun.
Yeah. Good time to plug the previous episode with Andrew Luter about taking on investment and when not to take on investment and all the other things you can do to have working capital besides take on investors. So
Right.
I'll plug that right there. So there's a lot of pre-launch and early stage outdoor founders who listen to this podcast, and they're listening to this and they're thanking you right now for giving us a really just a clear masterclass on how you go from product to launch. And I really appreciate this. You've given a lot of advice, but if you could just sum it up in like two or three like key pieces of advice that you would give somebody based on your experiences so far, what would you give them?
Yeah. The first one, which is more life advice than business advice, is something that I said earlier. Be the biggest fan of everyone around you that you possibly can be. The the reason that I say that is when Mammoth Trail Fest came on the scene, I hopped in with like 4 days of training, and I had basically taken the summer off of training, and I ran quite slowly compared to what I'm able to do now. But I have called myself Mammoth Trail Fest biggest fan since the first year and every year since then. And I think everyone would agree with that at this point, but being fans of the people around you, your friends, your family, the events that you go to, etc. Everyone likes to act cool and like they don't care, at least in some spheres, but caring a lot and giving a about the people who are around you is comes back in spades. Don't do it from a selfish perspective, but like life's way more fun when you do it that way. And I have ended up where this company has ended up where it is because the people that I have been huge fans of and told them that I am big fans of. I've told Tim that I look up to him a ton of times over the last however many years and what he's built. Um, that comes back in spades. There's a reason that Mammoth Trail Fest is doing custom belts with us. And that probably would not have happened if I wasn't Mammoth Trail Fest biggest fan for the last 4 years. Second one is ask for help. It doesn't matter if you think that you know XYZ already. Like I I had so many calls. I've had 15, 20, 25 calls with people who repeat calls with people who have overlapping areas of expertise. I want everyone else as an expert in their area. And just like I've given a bunch of outdoor founders advice on how to run meta ads or how to start running meta ads, because that's where my job was a couple of years ago, everyone else is willing to help. And so it's a pretty easy process to get into. And that goes back to the first thing too, is like give a part of being a fan is like giving your time. And so asking help is okay too, as long as you're also giving your time as well. We talked about Maddie and Matt Sims earlier. I do some contract work for them at this point, but the original time that we got in touch with each other was because I said, "Hey, I love your socks." Maddie was asking how to find an outdoor agency to work with for her meta ads. And I said, "Hey, you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to own them yourself for as long as possible, and I'll show you how." And that was solely that was not a sales pitch. That was not anything. I told Maddie that up front. I said, "You can say no, but give me access to your meta account and I'll type you up a 2-pager and we can go over it on a call." That's because I'm such a big fan of what they do. But we're now great friends because I told them I'm a big fan of what they do, and they've given me a ton of value and advice in return. And this isn't transactional. It really is because I love what they're doing and they love what I'm doing. So those are the first two. Be a big fan of everybody, ask for help, but also be willing to give your time. Um, and then the third one is that not everyone is in this speed to launch sort of thing. And there's this saying that goes around a ton, which is like, if you're not totally embarrassed of your first product, you launched too late. I don't totally prescribe to that because, in my opinion, we have to really recognize the value that people are giving us in terms of dollar bills when they place a purchase. I'm really proud of the product that we built. We are making some changes that will probably be seen next year. It's not going to totally change the functionality of the product. The product itself is still great now. But I'm not embarrassed of what we put out. And that made it so that I was very confident of asking people between $100 and $129 for the product that we built. I'm not saying wait 6 years. Don't do that either. But I would push back on the general advice that you should be embarrassed of your first product. I think that if people are going to see you as being genuine, which is a key part of being a brand new company that nobody knows about, you should be proud of what you're putting out into the world.
All right, I stand corrected because I have said that line on this podcast before, so I appreciate that.
I can see the advice going in both directions, but to me it's like, and I don't make a ton of money in my day job. I'm definitely in the lower third of earnings in as far as the trail running industry goes. Um, or as far as trail runners go. Um, but people take their money very seriously, and you don't want to have a bunch of returns because you're embarrassed of your product. That also sucks. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really appreciate that perspective. What has been harder in this process than you expected?
there's a ton of emotional investment, and I knew that that was coming. Like I'd been a founder before, but like when I get requests for a return because the belt didn't work for someone quite right, that's really hard still. And I just like I won't be offloading my customer service to an AI anytime soon. I think the individual connection is important, but those are the kinds of messages I want someone else to handle. That's really hard. The rest of it is honestly really fun. Like, yeah, I've had to stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning shipping orders a couple of times, but like I expected that. There's an emotional investment here that I didn't remember how invested I was the first time around, but also got a lot more people running around with my product now than I did several years ago. But that also means that when people say great things, I get emails all the time of people being like, I've tried this $150 belt and I've tried this $90 belt and I've tried everything and yours is the one that finally works. I get the benefit on that side too. So it
Heck yeah,
kind of all evens out.
that's great. What's been easier than you expected, if anything?
The amount of revenue that we've done so far is well far and beyond what I thought we were going to do.
Nice.
I I gave some numbers to some friends on our launch weekend. These are not exact numbers, but the day before we launched, I was like, we'll do somewhere between $2,000 and $20,000 of revenue in the first weekend, and we far surpassed the upper end of that in 8 hours. And that was we did the upper end of the range that I was giving to people in like 30 minutes or something crazy. I before we had even before I had even sent the email, I said we were launching at 10 a.m. and I hit update on the stock on Shopify at 10 a.m. and my phone blew up with orders and had the Shopify order notification was just rolling for 5 minutes straight. That was a surreal experience. I still don't know. We only put $800 into Facebook ads, and so we well more than made a reasonable return on that investment. So that's been easier, but that momentum is not a given going forward. So I know that work needs to continue being built.
Well, that's just a confirmation. Those are data points. It says that you have built this thing a good solid foundation. So congrats to you on that, man. It's super, super cool. I loved hearing your story about this. Everybody should go check out the Second Nature podcast. If you don't, everybody should also join the Second Nature Slack channel because that's where a lot of your relationships, it sounds like, came about because that is a Slack channel full of people in the outdoor industry that want to help each other. So go there if you haven't already. I will link to that as well. The question I end all my episodes with is how do you define success for yourself?
I Several years ago, my dad also asked me this question. Um, and my answer was that at the end of every year, I want to look back and say that I had fun and that the world benefited from me being here. There have been a couple years recently that hasn't totally been true. This is the first year that I'm really thinking that I'll be able to say that at the end of the year. So that's success. That's success in life and in business. But I have a stronger community now than I've had in many years. This business, like people love what we're building. And I think that I know that people have told me that their running experience is better because of the product we built. So I think the world is benefiting from what I'm building and the relationships that I'm building. And I'm having fun at this point. So that's success to me.
Heck yes. Morgan, so cool. I love this. I heard you talk for 10 minutes to Aaron. I was like, this guy is onto something. And the way you're approaching it and your mindset and all those things, you're punching above your weight already. And it's very cool to see. So congrats on the early success and to a whole lot more that's going to come your way.
Thank you, Christian. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Where can people go to buy their own belt?
Yeah. Go to rundera.com. It's a very simple website at this point. We've got belts that include a flask, and if you want another flask, there's more of them on the website. But it's pretty easy to find.
Keep it simple. I love it. All right, man. I appreciate it so much.
Cool. Thank you.